It's an important question, and it's one where the answer is a little nerdy and academic, for lack of scientific terms. And what I mean by that is we know that patients with atopic dermatitis have dramatically higher rates of allergic diseases, atopic diseases, asthma, hay fever, food allergies, allergic conjunctivitis, eosinophilic esophagitis, etc. We also know the more severe the atopic dermatitis, the more likely patients are to develop those comorbidities. And we know that for many, that the atopic dermatitis will precede the development of some of these different atopic comorbidities. The bigger challenge is the term atopic march is a very specific sort of temporal pattern to say that atopic dermatitis comes first or around concomitantly with food allergies, and then will sort of predictively go next to then asthma, and then hay fever, and then maybe at modified years later to say, okay, eosinophilic esophagitis much later on. And it turns out that patients don't follow that temporal trajectory. So everything I started with is true, but for many patients, their atopic comorbidities actually precede the atopic dermatitis. For some patients, they don't develop asthma, they jump straight to food allergy, or they have food allergy, but they never get allergic, conjunctivitis or hay fever, or they might get it much later on in life or much earlier on in life. So I think we shouldn't think of the atopic march very rigidly, but at the same time, many of the concepts hold true that patients with atopic dermatitis do in fact markedly higher rates of atopic comorbidities, and that the atopic dermatitis for many might be sort of that gatekeeping disease that allows that to happen. We have relatively limited translational data for the elderly population. So I think we certainly welcome more research in that area. Clinically, though, we see very clearly that there are, some patients have a very similar phenotype in geriatric age group as they do in younger children or in younger adults. And for many, though, it is a different phenotype with more psoriasiform lesions, and perhaps a little bit of a less hyperinflammatory lesions, but more prominent itch and sleep disturbances that can come up. So there's clinically we see all the time differences, but I think we certainly welcome more research to understand the translational underpinnings of that. Insurance coverage for many of the advanced therapies in atopic dermatitis varies fairly widely between different private insurances and public insurance. But I think overall, the coverage has been coverage criteria have been fairly consistent between children and adults. We often are required to complete prior authorizations, but I think that's pretty consistent between the children and the adults. With the one caveat being that each of the therapies has its own, age for indication. So dupilumab is the only one that's approved down to age 6 months at this point, whereas tralokinumab is approved down to age 12. The oral JAKs are approved down to age 12. But with more data coming, there likely will be updates and we'll eventually see even younger age groups covered. So right now, on label would be, based on what those approved indications age groups are.